In the summer of 2018, I was in a long-distance relationship that was pretty serious but also pretty new at the time. My boyfriend, who had driven those 4 hours to see me on every break we had from school, essentially begged me to come visit him at his grandmother's house. I didn't have a car at the time, but I really wanted to impress him and show my dedication to the relationship by going to visit him. So, I dropped some coin on a Greyhound bus and was excited to meet up with him. At first, everything seemed fine. I took a seat at the back of the bus because I really didn't want to speak to anyone, but the bus was pretty full, so inevitably this guy sat down next to me. No red flags, just seemed like a regular guy, maybe in his late 20s or early 30s. So I put my earbuds in and just ignored him. Before I continue, I'd like to highlight some character flaws of mine at the time that this happened. When I was 18, I was an extremely non-judgmental person and tended to see the best in people, even to a fault. This tends to land me in very bad and sometimes dangerous situations. At 18, I simply didn't know any better and kind of overlooked potentially concerning actions. There was a guy in the seat in front of us who would not stop talking, to no one in particular, but he was facing a girl in the next seat of seats across from him. Again, I didn't want to judge. Maybe he had some type of mental problem he couldn't help, and he wasn't doing any harm, so I ignored him too and continued to stare out of the window, listening to music. That is, until he turned around and stared at me. Now, I might have been naive but not stupid. A chill ran through my spine as I made eye contact with this man. He had these cold, callous eyes, and his skin lacked so much saturation it looked like he'd been covered in dust. I take out my earbuds and he immediately turns to the guy next to me, and they engage in conversation. I was really set on edge when I overheard them discussing how they were both ex-convicts that recently got out of prison. Remember me being non-judgmental? I figured maybe they served prison time for something that was minor, given their access to a public bus. I'm not sure how all of that works. Obviously, they don't do background checks for a Greyhound bus, but still, I tried not to think anything of it. The man in front of us turns to me now, and I can remember exactly what he said. But he called me baby, which kind of freaked me out, but I couldn't say I wasn't used to it. I figured it was just another grown creep hitting on me. Annoyed, I put my earbuds back in and ignored him until the bus stopped at a rest stop. Most people got off, including the guy next to me, leaving just me and the guy in front of me in the back of the bus. He asked if I would come up and sit next to him to make friendly conversation, and my dumbass actually did it. Keep in mind that I was 18 and unfathomably stupid, and I also lacked the gut feeling that something was wrong. He starts telling me that he just got out of prison and hasn't seen a woman in a long time. I said something along the lines of, "That's unfortunate," and inched away from him. He scooted over to me so that our legs were touching, and that's when my heart rate really started to pick up. The next thing I know, his hands are on me. He wrapped them around my waist and went on about how small I was, then commented about how it'd been so long since he touched a woman. I was paralyzed. I had no idea what to do. He kept going on about how I should be a model while continuing to grope me. Again, I was absolutely terrified and couldn't bring myself to move. Soon enough, everybody got back on the bus, including the guy who sat next to me, who shot the other man a weird look that prompted him to let me go. I scrambled out of the seat and still sat behind him, not knowing what to do, but feeling safer that other people were on the bus. He didn't bother me again after that, so I just prayed it would stay that way. It gets worse. The bus stops at another rest stop, and this time I get off, not wanting to be stuck in that vehicle again. I'm just chilling, as much as one can be chill after something like that, when a girl I recognized from the bus came up to me, She said, "Hey, that guy that was talking to you just left in a car but is circling the building. He keeps leaving and then coming back. I'm sorry I didn't say anything earlier." I thanked her for the warning, put a hoodie on in 85-degree weather, and flipped up the hood so he wouldn't see me get back on the bus. Luckily, I never saw him again. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone what had happened, due to my lack of competence and general understanding of how the world can be. When I met up with my boyfriend, I gave him very vague details, wanting to forget it ever happened, but now I don't think that's possible. Ex-convict on a Greyhound bus? Let's never meet again. I was working as an assistant manager at a local KFC where I worked for roughly 2 to 3 years. I have some very good memories from this place, as well as some really funny stories. We became severely understaffed at one point, and my general manager at the time left to work for CC's Pizza. Because of this, I was left in charge of the store until they found or decided on a replacement for him. After probably 3 months or so, they finally send us help. A guy and several of his employees from a store located about 40 minutes away. Some things to understand about this store. It was located in a very wealthy neighborhood and subsequently had very wealthy employees. Anyway, new manager, Mike, comes in and immediately starts barking orders at everyone. Obviously, no one is listening to him. But when I tell them to do the same exact thing, they get it done post-haste. He asks me why they won't listen to him, but will listen to me, and I explain to him that they aren't here for the money, they're here for the experience. I reminded him that they are driving Ferraris to work, and that he needs to be their friend and their boss. In other words, earn their respect, and they will respect you. He agrees to let up on them and try it my way instead. He did listen to me and did start to earn their respect. Then he turns on me and starts demanding stupid and ridiculous things around the store, most of which are related to late-night cleaning, which he knew I didn't do myself and didn't have time for with deposits and whatnot. I got admittedly pissed off and told him to fuck off. After a few weeks of this and a serious amount of stress over the last few months, I decided to put my 2 weeks' notice. At this point, I had already started looking for a job elsewhere and had several offers on the table. I took a job about 2 miles up the street at a local Burger King as their general manager. I ended up working a lot of late shifts because we were understaffed for those particular shifts. This was fine, but it also meant closing the front by myself, while my cook closed the back of the store. I didn't really pay much attention at first. Hell, it was barely noticeable. But at the same time, every night, the same car would park in front of the lot facing the store and just sit there for hours on end. I honestly thought it was kids making out or something at first, but that clearly was not the case. I was always last to leave the store and set the alarm. One night, the second I lock the door behind me and start to head to my car, the engine of the car in front of the restaurant starts to turn on. It startled me, so I looked over, but all I could see was the headlights, and the car didn't move. I hurried to my vehicle and started to drive away. The second I left the parking lot, so did the other car in the parking lot. My drive wasn't particularly far from home, but I had this gut feeling that it would be a bad idea to head there. I started down the very empty 1 a.m. highway and switched into the left lane with the guy still following behind me. After a minute or two, at 10 or 15 miles above the speed limit, I decide to switch into the right lane and drastically slow down to see if he will pass me. The guy also switches over and slows drastically down. Now, I'm not stupid. I know when I'm being followed, and at this point, I'm scared. I grab my almost dead phone and call my husband. I frantically spout out what is going on, and he tells me to drive to the police station, so I start heading in that direction. I don't know if this guy caught on to that or not, but right before we hit the road, the station is right there. He blows by me at an insane speed and keeps driving. I turned around and went home. Fast forward another week, and I see the same guy sitting out in the parking lot again in the same car. This time, I call the cops right away at the urging of my cook and my assistant manager. The cops showed up and get the guy to come out of the car. It's Mike from my old job. He tells them he wasn't doing anything wrong and developed a crush on me from our time together at our old job and just wanted to say hi. They did not arrest him, but told him to get the fuck out of there and put enough fear in him that he did not come back again. First, I feel as though I have to give you readers some background information about myself. I was raised by my mother, who is 50% Cherokee and 50% French, and believes in paranormal things but tries to pretend it isn't there, and by my father, who is Scottish, English, German, and Jewish. He, on the other hand, is 100% atheist and is rather skeptical about things he cannot explain. He endeavors to be a logical and scientific person in all things. Well, due to major differences in personalities, beliefs, and values, they divorced when I was 8. She soon married my stepfather, who is a devout Southern Baptist from Mississippi, and basically gave up her identity as a native and became a God-fearing woman. Despite issues with my mother, my dad continued to let us visit with her mom and stepdad because he had felt they were good people. They taught us many things about native culture and spirituality, legends, and the people. My grandmother and I spent a lot of time together, so I was given an opportunity to learn Cherokee medicine. My grandma comes from a long line of medicine men and women and is one herself. Now, so many years later, at the ripe old age of 23, I am one myself. So now you have some insight, and I'll continue. Now, this isn't a ghost story, but I do believe it qualifies as paranormal, as it is outside usual daily happenings. About 2 years ago, my father, brother, and I moved into a new home a little more in the country than our previous homes had been. Something we all thoroughly enjoyed because we grew up immersed in nature and a love for the land. Shortly after moving there, I decided it was time to expand my family by getting myself a puppy. This would be the first dog that would actually be in my care. I've always had a very strong connection to dogs, as my guiding spirit is a wolf. After a while of searching, I came across a beautiful 5-month-old male German Shepherd Pit Bull mix. I went to meet him and instantly fell in love. He was the greatest, very sweet, kind to the cats, and protective of me. He became my best friend, everything you could want in a dog. Now, anyone who has owned a puppy will know potty training is a task. Even after being with us for 2 months, he was still waking me up every 2 to 4 hours to go outside. Hard on the circadian rhythm, but had to be done. On this occasion in particular, we got a late-night visitor we weren't expecting. Like I said, my dog woke me up in the night. This time it was around 2:45 a.m. and I wasn't ready, but I dragged myself out of bed and clicked on the leash. Opening the back door greeted me with a cool breeze. I rolled my eyes and went into the yard with my pooch. He did the usual dog thing, sniffled around and jumped in the freshly cut grass, completely forgetting what we'd come outside to do in the first place. I whistled at him, recaptured his attention, and he got back to business. As he squatted, I turned my head to the sky, offering him some privacy. The moon was exceptionally large that night, almost full, but not quite. During this observation, I began to realize there was no typical nighttime noise around me. As if that wasn't unusual enough, I had a shiver go down my spine, and my arm hair began to stand on end. That's when I heard my dog let out a low growl as he pinned himself against my legs. When I looked down at him, his tail was tucked and hackles were raised. When I tried to move, he pressured himself against me more. Another shiver came over me, and now I took the opportunity to follow where his eyes were looking. When I did, I was looking at what appeared to be a coyote. Not totally uncommon in the area. We'd heard them on many nights living here, but this was different, looked different, and felt different. The most frightening thing, however, was that it was looking right back at me. I didn't move, didn't take my eyes off of it. That's how I was able to see its features so clearly in the moonlight. Its fur looked thin, even bald in some spots. Its eyes were yellow. Not reflective yellow like you'd see on a dog in the dark, but yellow like the sun. Very powerful and almost blinding. Then looking more closely, I noticed its back legs were longer than a normal coyote. Longer than any canine creature should be, actually. Starting at the hips and going down, they seemed to look almost bipedal in design. That's when it dawned on me just what I was seeing. I picked up my 60-pound dog, never taking my eyes off the creature. As I did, I said a Cherokee prayer in my head that I'd learned from my grandma. As if it was physically upset, it backed up slightly, and then I heard a voice that perfectly mimicked my grandma say, "Why would you do that, Mikers?" No one aside from my grandparents ever called me that. It was their special name for me. With that, I darted for the door, dog still in my arms, entered the door, put him down, and locked it behind me. The noise must have woken my brother because he came into the kitchen all bothered. He asked what was going on and why the dog was all riled up. I held my finger to my mouth and shut off the light. We then made our way into the living room and shut that light off as well. And, like something out of a horror movie, the outline of a tall humanoid thing shone through the stained glass of the small window on the door. Thanks to the bright moonlight, we both froze, and he made a grab for the doorknob when it started to turn, capturing it just in time to lock it. That's when it spoke to him, but this time in my grandpa's voice. "Baba, why don't you let Grandpa in?" His face turned ghost white, and he turned to me. That's when I mouthed the word, and he paled even more. It began to tap on the glass, and we both went into my room and ignored the knocking. The next night, around the same time, the tapping grew louder. We sat in the living room praying to the Cherokee sun goddess that it would go away. The tapping turned into knocks, which turned into pounding the more we prayed. This must have woken my father because he came downstairs in a huff. We told him about the night prior during the day, but he didn't believe us and thought it was just one of my brother's friends being an asshole. So when he saw the silhouette in the window, he grew even more angry and made a beeline for the door. We yelled at him not to open it, but he did. However, instead of harming him, it seemed to be afraid because it got down on 4 legs again and disappeared down the road. My dad's face paled as he stumbled back a few steps. He locked the door behind him, and we all went to bed. The next day, we talked about the situation. I explained to him the natives call this creature a skinwalker. They aren't very common in Cherokee legend. They're more of a Western native legend, but my grandparents still taught us about them. Dad, being the skeptic, just summed it up to a weird thing he couldn't explain. Later that day, I went to our local craft store and bought juniper ash, as my grandma instructed, and sprinkled it around our house. It never returned, but my dog was never the same after that night. It's as though the entire experience changed him. He went from a loving animal to mean and unpredictable. He started lashing out at anyone who wasn't female. We tried correcting it over the course of a year and a half, but nothing helped. He finally harmed my brother, causing him to bleed, and I was forced to find a new home. Luckily, he is with a couple who are both female, and he seems much happier. But even to this day, I guarantee he won't go out at night. I didn't mention the name of the creature many times because it's considered a bad omen in native culture to give those things energy. If anyone is nervous after reading this, please feel free to message me, and I will happily walk you through a prayer and ritual taught to me by my grandmother. I hope you enjoyed this, and pleasant dreams. This happened near the end of summer in 2016, back when Pokemon Go had just come out, and it was a huge thing. The summer nights were warm enough to stay out late. My girlfriend, my brother, and a small group of his friends were also really into it. We were all in our mid-20s and had all grown up on it as kids. Needless to say, we were all addicted. We all headed out together in a small group of 4 guys and 2 girls. We started around 5 p.m. and quickly lost track of time catching Pokemon, battling gyms together as we were all Team Blue, and hitting up every Pokestop we see in sight. Pokestops are real-world GPS locations you go to collect extra points and items in-game. We were in a sketchy area near a large river and park with lots of bike paths and tall bushes, where groups of homeless people and drug users often hang out. My brother and I grew up in the area and had just become numb to it, and didn't think much of it. We were all starting to get tired, but locked into the game. We realize it is about 2 a.m. and decide to hit one last Pokestop at the end of the road we are on. As we come near the Pokestop, we see it's behind an abandoned parking lot in a secluded area. This is weird to us as most Pokestops are in a common public place, but we decide to continue on. We walk off the road and to the back side of the parking lot, and then a little deeper into an empty dirt field. We are a football field away from the road now, and it is pitch black out here, with no road lights by and only have some starlight. There were random large bushes out here all scattered around. We keep walking past them to finally get to the Pokestop. We all stop for a moment and start collecting our points, when we hear the sound of a twig snapping nearby. We all thought we were alone, and this sound immediately gets everyone's attention. And we are all dead silent, off our phones and looking around. I noticed the shape of a large man who was standing inside one of the bushes right next to us, and chills start going down my back. He is dead silent, not moving at all, and looking straight at us. After a short moment, the shock passes, and I collect my thoughts. I was very thankful to be in a group and alert everyone. I immediately turn my phone flashlight on and put it directly on him, and my girlfriend lets out a sound of fear I had never heard from her before, which gives me even more chills. She is visibly shaking and holding my arm, begging me to get us out of there. We all slowly walk back together towards the road in a group while I keep the light on him. As we are walking, I make sure to tell him that I see him and ask him why the hell he's out here hiding in a bush. He doesn't say a single word or even move. I'm getting more freaked out by the second and not sure if he might have a weapon or not. We all get back to the road and start to relax a little and let out some relief laughs as we head home quickly. I'm not sure why a grown man would be hiding in a bush at 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere right next to a Pokestop, but I had no doubt in my mind that he had bad intentions. I didn't sleep great that night. I couldn't stop thinking if any other poor souls may have crossed his path going to that Pokestop, and even worse, if they had been alone. I just came out of a relationship and felt like a bit of casual dating will be fun. So I went on to Tinder. I made it clear to the few people I actually matched with and spoke to that I didn't want anything serious. Just a dinner date or a pub night here and there. I matched with a really cute guy. Let's call him Pete. He had just moved to my city and also wasn't looking for anything serious. He just wanted to meet some people and see some local spots. The first night we met up at a well-known bar. I chose this place because I had a few friends that were waitresses and bar staff there, so I felt safe meeting a stranger here. He was on time. We had a nice chat. Really cool guy on first impression. We spoke about work, to which he responded that he's a software developer, but he just started his freelancing career. We spoke about where he stays now that he's moved up here, and he said that he's sharing a place with some friends. Rent is quite pricey in this city, so it made sense to me. He asked where I live, and I told him that I'm lucky to have my own one-bedroom apartment in quite a nice and popular part of town. Mostly thanks to my parents that helped me save and gave me a portion of the deposit money for my 21st birthday, which I invested and grew until I had enough to put down a decent deposit. He then offered to drop me off at home, but I said no, I'd prefer to Uber home by myself. He asked if this was because I'm going to go meet someone else after him. I laughed because I genuinely thought this was a joke. The next time I saw Pete was about 3 days later. He said he knew it was fast, but he actually couldn't stop thinking about me, and he wanted to see me again. This time we met at a different restaurant, also one I chose because I went to school with the owner and knew all the staff pretty well. The place is a little bit more pricey, and he got super annoyed with me for ordering as much as I did. I couldn't understand why, since I insisted on paying for my own stuff both times we met. That night, same story. "Let me drop you off at home, please." Again, I said no. While we were in the middle of this conversation, he gets a call. He stepped away, but I could still hear a fair amount. "No, I think I'm going to stay with you again." "Yeah, I'm with her. Don't worry about it." "Okay, I'll be home soon." So now I think he's chatting to his roommate or maybe his mom, but I don't ask. He comes back to our table. "Please, I insist. Bad things happen to women that Uber home this late by themselves. I'd feel better if I dropped you off." Not having the energy to argue, I tell him fine. I put my address into his GPS. As soon as he got home, he messages me and tells me he'll be picking me up in the morning to go for a picnic. I reply that I actually have cleaning to do, but again, he insists that he'll see me at 10. Come 10 a.m. that next morning, best believe he's right outside my apartment. I get into his car, and he leans over to kiss my cheek. I notice that his breath stinks. Obviously, I'm a little grossed out. We have our picnic, and it's quite nice. He tried to kiss me a few times, but I avoided it with everything in me. By about 4 p.m., I tell him that I really want to go home, and the park we went to is about an hour-and-a-half drive from my apartment, so I couldn't really Uber back home because it would cost a fortune. He agrees it's time to go, so we get in his car, and we're off. I fall asleep in the car on the drive back, and when I woke up, he asked if we should finish the rest of the bubbly we got from mimosas up at my apartment. I said to him I don't want to, and he just snaps. He raised his voice and said something along the lines of, "What are you hiding from me? Just be honest. Why are you so desperate to keep me out of your apartment?" I was so confused, I actually just kept quiet. He dropped me off, but I could see his car across from my apartment for about a half an hour before he actually left. About 5 minutes after he left, he let me know that he's home safe and thinks he's starting to fall for me. So naturally, I'm freaked out because I made it clear that I didn't want anything serious, and he said he felt the same. I said to him if that's the case, I think we should take a break from hanging out with each other. About 5 days later, he messages and asks if we can go for dinner again. He found an Indian cuisine place he knows I'll love. I tell him it's cool, he should just send me the address. He tells me that he'll pick me up. So 7 p.m. comes, he tells me he's downstairs, and as I go down to meet him, I see he's standing at my gate. I press the remote control to open the gate, and he walked inside to meet me. "Show me which one is yours. I'd love to see how you live." Not "hi," not "how are you," that's his opening line. So I'm naturally unsettled. I say to him that I'm starving. Could we go for dinner and I'll show him my place at a later stage? At dinner, he gets a call again. This time, he didn't step away. Yeah, I don't know. I can let you know by about 10? He then turns to me. Am I sleeping by you tonight? No, I don't know. I have work tomorrow. Yes, me too. I'll let you know, okay?
No, you're not. You can just get your things, please.
And do what with them?
Take them to that girl you're seeing. I'm done asking you.
Now, I'm sitting here in absolute shock and terror. What in the fuck is going on here? Our food arrives, and we barely speak. I say to him, why did you ask me if you can sleep over by me? We're not spending time together like that. You know this. He then spins this story about how he just wants to hang out and again see how I live. I then say to him, very frankly, that I don't like having strangers in my apartment. He gets very quiet, and the bill arrives. As per usual, I pay for myself, and he pays for himself. I say to him I'll get an Uber home, and he says, what's the use? I already know where you live. Let me drop you off. By now, I've already decided that this will be the last time I see him. I get into his car, and I reach for my jumper that I threw in the back when he fetched me. I notice a bag in the back of the car, full of clothes and toiletries, as well as a pillow. I don't think much of it. I don't personally drive or own a car, but I know my sister always has the most random shit in the back seat of her car. On the way home, he's dead quiet, when suddenly he says, do you know how selfish you are? I've had no issues driving you around, but you don't want me to sleep over by you? I say to him that I've never had an issue with Ubering, and if he's so pissed, I also have no issue with paying him what the Ubers would have cost me. I'm over this, and I'm not even playing nice anymore. His phone rings again.
Your stuff is at the security boom at the gate, Pete. Stay with your girlfriend or stay with your mom. You're fucked for taking advantage of everyone like this.
I don't speak to my mom, you know this, you bitch, and then hangs up. Now, I think this is maybe an ex-girlfriend that he needs to collect things from. Before I've even had a chance to process what happened, he turns to me and starts yelling at me. I have nowhere to go. Are you fucking happy? You spoiled brat, living off mommy and daddy's money, getting driven around by me like I fucking work for you, bitch. My whole body got stiff with fear. I don't know if I'm going to cry or throw up. In my head, I'm just planning how I'm going to grab my bag the second he stops and run straight to the cafe under my apartment. If you run through the cafe, you can get to a gate that takes you to the back part of my apartment, and it works with fingerprint access. There wasn't time to find my keys in my bag, and I didn't want the main gate I normally use to open wide enough for him to get in when I go in. He stops at my apartment, and as planned, I jump out, run into the cafe, run out the back, through the little gate, up to the second floor, and hammered on a neighbor's door. I went inside and told her and her husband everything that happened, and asked if they wouldn't mind calling the cafe to explain why I ran through with no explanation, and in such a state. I blocked Pete and haven't seen him since. I'm still not sure what his case was. From what I gathered, he was basically homeless, and I think he wanted to get into my apartment to maybe sleep over there for a while. I'm not sure if the girl that kept calling him was also a Tinder date that let him stay at her apartment, and he just never left. All I know is that he scared the living daylights out of me, and I never, ever want to see him again.